It was a typical evening. The kind where the mundane tasks of the day had piled up, and we both sat across from each other at the dinner table, our plates half finished. The quiet between us was thick, heavier than it had ever been before. I could feel the tension in the air, like static before a storm. I had no idea what had started it. Maybe it was the way he spoke to me earlier that day, or how he seemed more distant every time I tried to reach out. But, as the evening wore on, it became clear that something was broken. I don't remember who started it, but it didn't take long for the words to escalate. The usual complaints, his long hours at work, my dissatisfaction with being stuck at home, began to swirl between us. We had fallen into the same tired arguments, the same loops of frustration that we always did, but tonight, something was different. There was an edge in his voice that I hadn't heard before. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in years, and not in a good way. "You never seem happy," he said, his voice flat, almost accusing. I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep my composure, but inside, I was boiling. "I'm just tired, okay? We're both tired. This isn't working." "Maybe it's you that's the problem," he shot back. I felt my chest tighten, my fingers gripping the edge of the table. His words stung, but it wasn't just the words that hurt. It was the truth, or what I thought was the truth. I had been so desperate to keep everything together, so fixated on making the marriage work, that I didn't realize I had already given up. I didn't realize he had, too. "Fine," I snapped, my voice rising. "Maybe it'd be better if we just called it quits." He scoffed, shaking his head. "It's not that simple, Emma." I wanted to scream, to let all the anger, the frustration, the resentment pour out of me. I wanted to say everything that had been building up for so long. But instead, something twisted inside of me, and I found myself saying something I didn't mean, something I thought I'd never say. "If you die, I'll probably be remarried within a year." I said it without thinking, the words tumbling out in an attempt to push him away, to make him feel the same hurt that I did. I thought it would shock him, make him realize how broken we were, but instead, there was silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. His face went pale, and I could see the hurt in his eyes, the way he recoiled at my words. "I can't believe you just said that," he whispered. And in that moment, I realized I had crossed a line. I had said something so cruel, so careless, that I couldn't take it back. It was out in the open, hanging between us like a dark cloud. But I didn't apologize. I didn't even try to fix it. Instead, I laughed, nervously, trying to brush it off. I was just joking. You know, like, a dark joke. But he didn't laugh. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor, and without another word, he walked away. I didn't chase him. I didn't try to explain myself. I just sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, the weight of my own words sinking in. I had hurt him. And maybe, deep down, I knew that it was exactly what I wanted. I was angry, and I needed him to hurt too. Little did I know that my careless words would echo for a lot longer than I ever imagined. The days that followed were a blur. The argument, the words I had thrown out in anger, still hung in the air like smoke, but it wasn't until the silence settled that I realized how badly I had messed up. It wasn't just the joke I had made, it was the truth behind it. The marriage had been falling apart for months, and I had been too stubborn, too hurt, to see it. The house felt emptier after he left. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in, suffocating me. I kept expecting him to walk through the door, to tell me I was being ridiculous, to apologize for his part in the mess we had made of our life together. But he didn't. Every time I picked up my phone, I half expected a text, a call, anything that would give me a reason to believe that he still cared. But there was nothing. Then came the text. It was brief, cold, just a simple message: I'm leaving. No explanation, no apology, just the finality of it all. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. My mind raced. Was this because of the joke? Was it because of everything else we had been through? Was it my fault? I kept asking myself what I could have done differently, but the truth was, I knew. I had pushed him away. I had buried my feelings under sarcasm, under anger, under everything but the one thing that mattered: communication. We hadn't talked in months, not really. We'd been living like roommates, passing through the motions of a marriage that was already dead. But I hadn't wanted to admit it. Not to him, and certainly not to myself. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying the last words I had said to him, the way his face had looked when I dropped that horrible, careless line about remarriage. I had made a joke, thinking it would ease the tension, but it only made things worse. I didn't understand it at the time, but that was the moment he gave up. That was the moment I crossed the line from frustration to cruelty. For days, I was in a haze. I wandered through the house like a ghost, unsure of what to do, what to think. I couldn't call him, I couldn't make things right because I knew he was done. He had reached his limit. I had pushed him too far, and now there was nothing left. One morning, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection of the woman I didn't recognize. Who was she? The person who had said those awful words. The one who had driven him away with her anger and bitterness. I felt disgusted with myself, but there was no one to blame but me. It wasn't just the joke, it was everything I had ignored, every moment I had let slip by without truly seeing him, without truly listening. I wanted to call him, to apologize, to beg him to come back, but I knew it was too late. The damage had already been done. And for the first time, I realized that the marriage hadn't ended with his departure. It had ended long before that, when we stopped trying, when I stopped caring enough to fix things. The regret hit me like a wave, and I couldn't escape it. I had lost him, and it was my fault. Weeks passed, and the absence of him in my life started to settle into the very fabric of my existence. I didn't have the luxury of forgetting him. Every room, every corner of the house, reminded me of what had been lost. At first, I tried to distract myself, focusing on work, visiting friends, or even spending hours scrolling through my phone. But nothing could erase the silence that weighed heavy on my chest. It felt like the world had moved on, but I hadn't. I hadn't even had the chance to truly process what had happened. People around me noticed. Friends reached out, cautiously, unsure of what to say. I lied through my teeth, telling them I was fine, that everything was going to be okay. But inside, I was falling apart. And then there were the questions. The ones that kept me up at night, whispering doubts into my ear. What if he comes back? What if he forgives me? I had no way of knowing, and the uncertainty gnawed at me, a constant companion. My pride held me back from reaching out. I kept telling myself that I needed to give him space, that I needed to wait for him to come to me. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to realize that he might never come back. One day, I found myself standing at the window, staring out at the world passing by. I thought about the future, the one I had once imagined for us. But it was an empty future now, just a blank canvas. No matter how hard I tried to fill it with new dreams, nothing felt right. I missed him. I missed everything about him, the little things I had once taken for granted. I missed the way he would always leave his shoes in the hallway, the way he hummed to himself when he cooked dinner. But more than that, I missed the feeling of having someone there, someone to share the mundane moments with. It was then that I realized how much I had truly lost. It wasn't just the man I had married, it was the companionship, the comfort of knowing there was someone who understood me in a way no one else could. I had pushed him away, but it was more than that. We had both stopped trying. We had stopped putting in the effort that every relationship needs to survive. The guilt became overwhelming, suffocating. How had I let it get this bad? How had I let the anger and resentment take over? The realization hit me hard, like a punch to the stomach. I wasn't just sorry for the things I had said, I was sorry for everything I hadn't said, for all the things I had kept buried deep inside, for all the love I had withheld. And now, it was too late. I spent the next few days in a daze, going through the motions of my daily life, but feeling detached from it all. I could hear his voice in my head, his laughter, the way he used to call me by the silly nickname he had made up for me. Every memory felt like a wound. I wanted to reach out, to apologize, but I knew I couldn't. I knew I had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure if he would ever be able to forgive me. Then came the moment I had been dreading. It wasn't him reaching out to me, as I had secretly hoped. It was me reaching out to him, telling him how sorry I was. It wasn't much, just a message, but it felt like a desperate cry for help. I wanted to know if there was still a chance. I didn't want to live with the regret forever. But as I hit send, I felt a sense of finality. I had done everything I could. And now, I had to face whatever came next. Days went by after I sent that message, and I had convinced myself that he wouldn't reply. Maybe he had moved on, maybe he had already started his life somewhere else, without me. The idea of him forgetting me, of him finding someone else, weighed heavily on me. I spent those days trapped in my own thoughts, imagining the worst. The silence that followed felt unbearable, but I didn't want to admit how much I was hoping for some sort of response, even just a word from him. Then, one evening, as I sat on the couch, staring at the screen of my phone, I saw it. A message. It was from him. I froze, my heart racing. I had been preparing myself for nothing, preparing for the worst. But now, I wasn't sure what to expect. I slowly opened the message, my fingers trembling. I'm sorry too. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you said, but I think you deserve to be happy. The words hit me like a wave. I had hoped for something, an apology, a chance to explain myself, a way to make things right, but this wasn't what I expected. It was a cold, detached response. He wasn't angry, but he wasn't warm either. There was no promise of reconciliation, no hint that he still cared. Just an acknowledgement of what had happened, and an acceptance that maybe we both needed to move on. I stared at the message, unsure of how to respond. I wanted to say something profound, something that would convince him that I had changed, that I was sorry for everything I had done. But the words wouldn't come. It felt like everything I had ever wanted to say was trapped inside, too heavy to bear. I took a deep breath and typed a reply, trying to keep my voice calm, to not let the emotion overwhelm me. I understand. I've been trying to forgive myself for what I said. I never meant it. I just wanted to hurt you because I was hurting. There was a long pause before he responded. I get that. I think we both hurt each other in ways that we can't take back. His words were true, painfully so. We had both hurt each other, knowingly and unknowingly. But as I read them, I felt a strange sense of relief. This wasn't a dramatic confrontation, a final goodbye. It was something different, a quiet understanding between two people who had shared something, who had loved each other once, and now needed to let go. I hope you find happiness, Emma, he wrote, his words carrying a weight I wasn't sure how to carry. You deserve it. And just like that, the conversation ended. There was no more. No attempt at rekindling, no questions about the past or the future. Just a simple wish for happiness, a closing of a chapter that had been both beautiful and painful. I sat there for a long time, the phone in my hands, staring at the message, letting it sink in. He had forgiven me in his own way. And while that wasn't enough to undo the past, it was enough to let me know that we both had a chance to move forward. I didn't feel relief exactly, but I felt something. Maybe it was acceptance. Maybe it was just the quiet calm of knowing that the door wasn't completely shut, even if we couldn't walk through it together anymore. It's been months now, and I still find myself reflecting on everything that happened, on the mistakes I made, the words I couldn't take back, and the way my life has shifted since then. Things aren't perfect. I haven't fixed everything, but I'm learning to live with what I've done, to accept the consequences, and to try and rebuild my life in a way that feels right. I stopped waiting for him to reach out. I had spent so much time in the past hoping he would come back, hoping we could pick up where we left off. But the truth was, the person I was back then was not the person I am now. I have changed, and in a way, so has he. We both carried baggage that weighed us down, and that was something we could never fully escape together. The hardest part wasn't just losing him, it was losing the vision of who I thought I was. The woman who would never be alone, the woman who could handle anything with a smile and a sharp word. But that version of me crumbled when everything fell apart. And in the quiet aftermath, I realized I had to start from scratch, that I had to rebuild not just my life, but also my own sense of self. I began to focus more on my own healing. I reached out to friends, people who had been there for me before, and began to talk, really talk, about what I had gone through. I cried more than I expected to, laughed more than I thought possible, and slowly, I started to feel like myself again. It wasn't easy, and I didn't always feel strong, but I knew I couldn't keep living in the past. I also began dating again, though it was nothing like I had expected. I had thought that after everything, I'd be able to dive right back into the world of relationships, but I was wrong. Each date was a reminder of how much I had to learn about myself before I could truly open up to someone else. I wasn't ready for another serious relationship, not yet. I needed to rediscover what it meant to be with someone without the weight of old wounds dragging me down. But even through the awkward conversations, the unsure moments, and the lingering thoughts of him, I began to see a path forward. I understood now that the mistakes I made didn't define me, they were simply lessons I had to learn the hard way. The key was in how I responded to those lessons. Would I let them break me, or would I use them to grow? I'm still learning. I still have bad days, days when I think about him and wonder what could have been. But I don't regret what happened. The pain, the heartache, it's all part of the process of finding myself again. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that I am capable of more than I thought. I am strong, I am worthy of love, and I am not defined by my mistakes. As for him, I don't know what the future holds. But I no longer feel the need to hold on to the past. I've made peace with it, and that's enough. I can't change the things I said, the hurt I caused, but I can control how I move forward. And I choose to move forward with my head held high, ready for whatever comes next. Subscribe to our channel for powerful real stories that touch your heart. Join a community where emotions run deep and every story brings a new perspective. Don't miss out, hit that bell for weekly updates.